Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the channel. I am Sylphin. We're going over the itemization presentation of concept video from MetaBuff, talking about, well, itemization. It's a doozy. It's one of the most complex systems of a very complex game in a complex genre. So to condense it into 8 minutes is pretty crazy. And it's very carefully worded and presented, and there's nuance in there. I mean, it's incredibly hard to talk about such a complex system in such a short amount of time. There's nuance in there that you have to pause and think about what that means. So please go and rewatch it and try to see what everything means. Now, this is a representation of the equipment system along with some of the items. So, blank screen. So, let's get right into it. Think of it as Legacy. Think of it like League, like Smite, whatever you want to. 6 equipment slots, or in this case, 6 sets. There's 6 sets of 3 items each. Now, in each of these 3 items, we have tier 1 items, tier 2 items, and tier 3 items. Kind of like Smite, where there's 3 tiers. Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Items can go into these slots, and they are called artifacts. So a tier 1 artifact, a tier 2 artifact, and a tier 3 artifact. You are going to buy these artifacts and put them in these slots one at a time to unlock the next tier, and then you will keep on going till you have all the items that you want. Simple as that. You can, as you put them on, this one still is giving you its attributes when you equip this one. This one is still giving you attributes and effects when this one is. They all are still there, even when you add onto another. In the in-game HUD, obviously, you're not going to be staring at 18 items and somewhere on your screen. They're going to be condensed to only showing the top item in each set. One nuance in there is that tier 3 items are the only ones with actives. So, since the highest tier is always shown, you will always see the cards with the actives, which you need to look at because you need to see if it's on cooldown or it's not, and where it is, and which button you need to press for how many active slots and how many active cards you can have, and passive or passives not determined yet and not disclosed yet. So that will be developed. So 6 sets, 6 equipment slots with 3 tiers each. Simple as that. Now, each item is put into a different discipline. There's 5, and each of them are for a different sort of gameplay. A carry is going to go, all carries and basic attack based heroes are going to really want to go for one sort of discipline because that discipline gives them the stats that they really want and scale off of. Mages are going to go for another discipline because that really gives them what they want. Supports and tanks and fighters and blah blah blah, etc., etc. Each discipline is suited for a certain gameplay that certain heroes are going to really want to get because that helps them serve their role and therefore help their team, because it's a team-wide dynamic of different roles and purposes. So keep that in mind when we start talking about this, because if you start building items off discipline, well, you're not going to scale well with that. You're going to, and it's not going to be worthwhile, and you're not going to serve your team. And Well, that's not good. That's not good, right? So you have to remember that the scaling is super important and maybe not correctly done in the past in Paragon, and there's something to improve there. So you can put these items in these slots as you see fit. You can put any tier 1 artifact from any discipline in this slot. You can put any T2 item from any discipline in this one, regardless of what you put here. And then same thing for this top slot, the tier 3 slot. Any tier 3 item artifact from any discipline can put it in here. Now, what is this? You can see that it's lit up here. Well, these disciplines act as a loose sort of build path, a loose build tree from other MOBAs. If you're familiar with Smite, there is a tree that goes up, and you have to buy buy items in order to get top ones. Disciplines serve this function, but it's loosely, because you can get any. It's loose as long as you buy a tier 1 item in the same discipline as this tier 2 item in the same discipline as the tier 3 item in the same discipline. Then you've fulfilled a build tree. You have fulfilled it because it's in the same discipline and it's the same sort of purpose for your hero. And that's when this little thing is unlocked, called a discipline stone. And what this discipline stone does is it gives you a small amount of advanced attributes that you really want for your role. This kind of sounds like the fully upgraded bonus from the first legacy system. And this is besides the fact that your hero is going to scale primarily off the items that are in your discipline, besides that, which is the biggest thing here that some people are seemingly forgetting, the discipline stone acts as that sort of that incentive to get these advanced attributes that are really good for your role, and it's free. You can put this in here if you've got all 3 tiers of the same discipline. It's free. However, there's a certain interesting added mechanic on top of this, because it's just you put one T1 item, another T2 item, and another T3 item. That's it. You're done. You put it like that. That's it. You put 3 items of the same discipline in order, get the stone. That's it. Well, there's an added depth to this as well, because there is a... Oh, okay, so that's on that one. There is a combination mechanic in some other MOBAs where you take some items and you combine them together, you combine their influence and inject some economy into it, and it evolves into another item that has the inherent math and the inherent influence of its components, plus this little bit of economy, into this other item. Now, this is from League of Legends, if you are familiar, and essentially, here is the combination system. You take a ruby crystal and a longsword, put them together, add 500 gold, and kapow! You get a phage. Now, this phage may not directly, but at least mathematically, has the same influence as the longsword and ruby crystal, plus the 500 in the phage. So, in order to add this sort of combination mechanic, you can swap out a tier 1 artifact for another tier 1 artifact, and a T2 artifact for another T2, and even another T3 for another T3 that is better than the one that you have. Because within each tier, there's going to be sort of these sub-tiers. There's going to be tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2, 2.5, 3. It's that sort of idea, where there's going to be cheaper tier 1s, and more expensive tier 1s, cheaper tier 2s, more expensive T2s. And as you can see, that's kind of represented here. As you can see, that's kind of represented here. And what this swapping enables you to do is, if we were to try to think of this build path here, like in core, if we went for the cheapest tier 1 discipline X into the cheapest tier 2 discipline X into the cheapest tier 3 discipline X, let's call it, well, then that's what this would kind of look like. And it's not going to be totally just because of what these are. It's going to be as if you went longsword into Kindle Gem into the Black Cleaver. And then you've got your discipline stone. Imagine there's a little thing here, and the discipline stone is kind of this 950 kind of it's a little added. Okay. Now, if we wanted to swap this T1 for another better tier 1, because it was the cheapest one, as you can see here, well then, all we do is just upgrade that one to a ruby crystal, which is, sure, we can do this one. Ruby crystal into the Kindle Gem. Great! We have the most powerful T1 item, and maybe that's not the same in League, but let's just say it is. That's the most powerful T1 item, and it works for me, and it works for my, it's a little bit better, and it's going to help me. It's going to help me a little bit. Awesome. Now we do the same with the T2. Okay, so I think this other T2 actually might work a little bit better. So instead of the Kindle Gem, I'm going to get the Phage, because we have the Ruby Crystal. Again, I'm just going to use this one into the Phage, into the Black Cleaver. Boom. Now I've upgraded, from the Longsword to the Ruby Crystal. I'm upgraded from the Kindle Gem into the Phage. Boom. And that's how I've upgraded that. Well, there's actually a T3 maybe. There's actually a T3 that's a little bit better even. And if there's another T3 or something, and then boom, we can now go into this other one, say. That is kind of what this combination, this swapping out system provides, and this sub-tier nature of each tier has in core. And that was what was mentioned in the script, but incredibly vaguely, because he's trying to explain it in 8 minutes. Because what that does is you can go cheap tier 1, cheap tier 2, cheap tier 3, and then you have to decide, do I want to forego my free discipline stone and upgrade my T2 and T1, maybe even my T3, then get my discipline stone? Because when you get the discipline stone, when you get something for free, it's always a drawback, and that is an increased selling fee for items in that set. So there's another dynamic that's all of a sudden present. Hey, if I wanted to scale early game, say I'm an early game scaling hero. Chimera was a traditional example of this. Here we go: cheap, 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 boom, cheap, 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 boom, cheap, 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 cheaper. Doesn't have to be extremely cheap. Boom, cheap. So then all of a sudden he's maybe a couple more ahead versus somebody else that's maybe playing the late game, because once Chimera's done, well, now he has to go back and be like, all right, sell or swap for a bigger one, but because he has the discipline stone, that means that this swapping incurs a greater selling fee. Then he has to swap this one out. Maybe there's a couple T3s that he wants to swap out. You're gonna have to keep on doing this and incurring this greater selling fee, whereas somebody else was playing maybe playing the late game, upgraded as they went. Maybe they got a couple tiers and they went back and upgraded, etc., etc. And that balance, the balance there between what that selling fee is, how valuable this consumable slot is, that balance in there. Obviously, I can't talk about that, but it is quite compelling. So there's these added in-depth systems that are there, but it all boils down to a T1, a T2, and a T3 item. And that's that. You can have all these items, fill them, and there you go. It really is that simple. T1, T2, and T3. Yeah. And then they talk about I talk about the consumables, which have potions, pretty self-explanatory, elixirs that kind of really buff your hero for a short period of time, and then wards. It said that you can have typically maybe up to 2. So if you put I don't know, use an example from another one, a health potion, you can have 2 health potions. You put there was talked about wards. You can have two basic wards or something, right? And then there's affinity wards, which give a small little gameplay effect. But it was said that each player is limited to how many affinity wards they can have out on the battlefield. So it can't be a bazillion of these affinity wards having the small gameplay effect out there, as I'm sure is kind of the implications of that is obvious. So very, very interesting. It's very similar to Legacy 1, 2, 3 upgraded bonus. It's quite interesting. Balance is going to be really important. What these cards are, hero scalings, it's going to be super important. But at the end of the day, it's quite unique. And of course, hero builds, like the decks, hero builds, god builds, and smite, obviously is absolutely going to be important, and something that everybody should be able to do in a MOBA. So you'll be able to plan this out and have your starting early items and et cetera, and a recommended build path that you can follow and stuff like that. And as you can see, you can sort items by certain kinds and the different disciplines, and there you go. And you can kind of see a little bit of the concept art here: a crying handgun, Usupers, flamethrower with these little dots that, well, 3 tiers, 3 dots, likely. That's what that is saying. And there you go. That is the item system. There was a icon. There was a big page of quite a number of icons that were there. Unfortunately, totally my bad. Totally our bad. There was some that were missing, and while that was both effect icons and itemized icons. So that absolutely made it much more confusing than it needed to be. It wasn't synced up to, it wasn't highlighted to what the script was saying. So my apologies, our apologies if that was A, it was incomplete, but B, if it was confusing, because there's energy damage to physical damage, but also conductive power and radiant power. So it's like, what? Can you itemize these damage types? No, the damage types aren't itemizable. They're just what your heroes deal. And the conductive and radiant power are what you itemize. Conductive power typically empowering basic attacks, while radiant power typically empowering ability attacks and that. The damage type that you deal does not necessarily dictate the itemization type that you go for. Mages can go for conductive power that is typically more for basic attacks, but still scale off of that and have their abilities deal physical damage. So you can see they do not necessarily correlate, but they typically do. So there you guys have it. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. I would love to try to explain this some more. I should have said this right off the beginning. This is incredibly early. It's a concept phase. It's essentially concept phase. The video said it's a presentation of concept. That's all it is. It's a concept. So yeah, let me know down in the comments, guys, what you think. I hope you guys enjoyed.